Very good. Next, formal presentation, Bobby Whitney. You've requested 9 minutes. You actually have enough speaker slips here for 12 if you needed it. But let me just confirm, Bob Whitney, I see you, Kim, I see you, and Brittany Ruggles. Very good, thank you. So go ahead.
All right, I'll try to be quick and see if I can get my mom up here for a little bit. My name's Bobby Whitney, the son of Bob and Kim Whitney, one of the applicants, born and raised in La Jolla, and here to speak on behalf of the proposed project. I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of the project and some of the events that have transpired over the last 8 years since we purchased this property to hopefully give you a succinct and holistic view of some of the things that I think are important. In 2007, we purchased this property and shortly thereafter hired our neighbor and prominent local architect, the late Dale Nagel, to design a 3-story mixed-use building on the site, which has been mentioned. We worked with Mr. Nagel and eventually came to the conclusion we wanted to go a different direction, so aesthetically. So we parted ways professionally and hired Tim Martin. Interestingly, the building envelope proposed by Mr. Nagel was fairly similar to the building that's before you today. And I do want to say that this was an early stage rendering, and I'm sure it would have changed a little bit, but this is where we were heading when we decided to go a different direction and go with Mr. Martin. Here you can see that the proposed building has some similarities in envelope. It also has a subterranean garage, which would have had the same historical archaeological impacts as our current building. My parents wanted to continue to meet with Mr. and Mrs. Nagel through the design process as they were the most affected neighbors. The first meeting was amicable, but after that, we haven't really been able to put this project back on course since then, about 6 years ago. For the most part, our opposition's current issues with the project, in my opinion, are all red herrings, and I think Robin did a good job of explaining why on a lot of those, especially the visibility triangles issue. With that said, we've spent the last 5 years and well over $400,000 just chasing the opposition's evolving arguments, that as we address certain arguments, they adapt or they're fictitious to start with. Some of those arguments are bulk and scale, citywide FARs, geological, archaeological concerns regarding the subterranean component, visibility triangles, and community character. I won't belabor the points that have already been made effectively to rebut those complaints by Robin, but I do want to mention just 2 things that I think will hopefully help put the bulk and scale, FAR, and community character complaints to bed. I don't need to say it, but I'll say it one more time. FARs are not at all applicable to the La Jolla Shores commercial zone whatsoever, but I do want to show that a portion of our neighbors' approved set of plans for an addition that they did back in 2000 that explicitly state on them that same point. FAR not applicable. That's for the building adjacent to us to the east. Next slide, please. Our east wall is a point of contention. I think Robin did a good job touching on that, so I'll skim through these quickly. Unity with variety is touched on all the time. It's kind of a cornerstone for the opposition as well for the proponents, which I think is a bit of a cause of concern for that even remaining in the PDO since it's so vague. But the relationship of adjacent structures is a common argument against our project. We've simply adopted the development pattern that can be seen progressing down the block, as Robin mentioned, where there are limited side setbacks or 0 side setbacks and sheer east walls are commonplace. And I would argue that the relationship of our property to the adjacent property to the east is certainly more similar than the relationship of that property to its neighbor to the east, as can be seen here. I want to stress that we've spent a considerable amount of time and money just chasing these arguments that always change. And for example, there was a complaint that I heard yesterday that I didn't intend to talk about today, but I think it really accurately portrays what I mean by chasing these arguments. Someone suggested that they were opposed to our project because of California's current water situation, which I'm glad that other people are as concerned about that serious issue as I am. But to even imply that this type of development is going to have any impact other than positive on the water situation or sustainability in California is preposterous. We're in a commercial zone on an infill lot, mixed uses with limited landscaping. Smart, but limited landscaping. If we want to talk about water, we should talk about the homes that are larger than this project on half-acre lots that are approved regularly in La Jolla Shores. I don't personally have a problem with them, but you can't have your cake and eat it too. City staff has always recommended approval of our project. We've been approved by the hearing officer, now twice by Planning Commission. We were told by City Council to do an EIR, despite the fact that we maintain that our second City Council hearing, where we were told to do an EIR, took place after what should have been the final approval of our project by Planning Commission, but due to that procedural issue that Robin's mentioned before, we ended up back in front of City Council. We were told to do an EIR, and we did so. We've been villainized a little bit, I think, by some of the opposition. I just want to clear some of the air there. There were some lawsuits filed during the entitlement process, and a lot of them aren't applicable to this project at all. It's other issues with the community group. But during the entitlement process, an architect on the local group took the plans that we had to submit to them and produce false renderings of our project to use as propaganda to harbor opposition to our project, and then has used them in local and city meetings since for material in their presentations. Here's a couple examples of those of that misleading information. I will give them credit for the second one on here, which is much closer to the actual project than the first that they went out with for I don't know how long around the neighborhood. Next slide, please, Tim. Here's another one that's commonly used that grossly exaggerates the difference between our proposed project and the rest of the development on the street by showing Avenida de la Playa as a flat street when there's more than 6 feet of slope from one end of the street to the other. It also says that the building to the east of us is 28 feet tall. It's actually 29.8 on the, the west side, and 29.4 on the east side due to that slope. We have those approved set of plans if anybody would like to see them later. After our second and what we think should have been final approval here at Planning Commission, our project was appealed by the president of the La Jolla Community Planning Association on behalf of the La Jolla Community Planning Association without a vote at a public hearing, which is not only against their rules, but it's against the city rules. That group later went on to vote to suspend those rules for our project, which is another reason why we ended up in front of City Council for a second time. Next slide. We've been put through the ringer procedurally and emotionally, and we're really frustrated and exhausted at this point. But we're determined because we're really proud of the building that we've designed. San Diego is one of the most beautiful places in the world. I'm biased. I was born here. I love La Jolla. I think geographically it's one of the most beautiful places in the world. But I think some of it needs a facelift. And I believe that most of the community agrees. We've had hundreds and hundreds of people come to local and city meetings in favor of our project over the last 6 years, and hundreds of people write letters of support. We're extremely grateful and humbled by all the support we've received thus far, and told our friends, family, and neighbors not to spend their day down here listening to the same story that we've heard for the last 6 years, and we're hoping that someday we'll be so lucky. We're proud of the design that Tim Martin has worked with us to achieve. We're proud that this building is fully in compliance with all the applicable rules and guidelines, and we're proud of the amount of support that we've garnered from people of La Jolla, especially from those who were initially opposed to our project prior to seeing what the building was really going to look like. This meeting may very well not be our last, but I plead that you help us get one step closer toward building what will be a great addition to the La Jolla Shores community and completing this emotional chapter of our lives. And